Today we're going to receive Dr. Joe and we're going to talk about coherence, we're going to talk about unity, we're going to talk about practice, and we're going to talk as well about the scientific research that he's conducting and how science that is backing all of that. What drives you? Why are you doing all of this?
My mission, my desire is to contribute to people's lives and to transform individuals that in some way hopefully will transform the world. If we weren't seeing the outcomes that we're seeing in people's health or the quality of their life, I would probably be doing something else. But we're seeing such dramatic changes in so many areas of people's lives that we've had to get into the science in a way to demystify what exactly happening for that person. And as we said the last time we were together, I think science is the contemporary language in this current time. And as you said, when you get down to truth, whatever tradition, whatever religion, whatever culture that you're from, truth is truth, right? And so what inspires me, I think, is seeing great testimony in human beings that have healed themselves from very serious health conditions, some terminal, and some of them have surprised me and changed my belief in what's possible. And then when you combine that with the investigation that we're doing with science, and we're partnering with different universities, and we're seeing over and over again that it's within you, that it's all within you, and that you can change your body by thought alone, you know, that there's a strong mind-body connection. The evidence that's being presented to us in science, in studying people that come to a 7-day, week-long retreat, and at the end of 7 days, their face is different. This is science now. The harmonicity of their voice is different. The language they use is different. Their microbiome is completely different without changing their diet or taking any probiotics or abstaining from anything. Their brain is different. Their heart is different. There are thousands of metabolites that are in their blood that are pro-life, pro-growth, pro-health. Their gene expression is different. Lactating mothers, their breast milk is different. Really, but the bottom line is everything changes when we change. So I'm inspired by the mystery that we're uncovering that basically says that we are greater than we think, more powerful than we know, more unlimited than we could ever dream. And being a part of this, and with my team and with the scientists, what a great reason to get out of bed in the morning.
That's what we find so inspiring in what you're doing, is that you, as you said, you are after truth. The truth of what is the human being, what is the machine we are, no? And you provide tools, practical tools, so people can be free, can unleash themselves, and can go contribute to themselves and to others, right? And feel this love that is all abundant.
And also, really, show people that independent of your race, your culture, your religion, independent of your past or what you eat, what you believe politically, independent of all those things that divide individuals, that our data is so profound, Pierre, because it's not 10% or 20% of the population that we're measuring, you know, small percentage, has a small percentage of change in their brain or their heart or their blood. Yeah. We're talking about 80% of the people that we examine, 90%, 95%, 100% of the people that we measure have these kind of biological changes. So I think when people begin to change and they begin to believe in something else, or they change the way they think, if they all behave in the same way and they can feel those elevated emotions, there's an emergent consciousness that takes place amongst the community that's being reflected in people's biology. Now, here's the crazy part about it. Everybody has their own genotype. You have your own genotype, I have my own genotype. Everybody has their own genotype based on their parents, based on their culture, based on their race. And genes make proteins, right? And proteins are the building blocks of life. At the end of 7 days, 80% of the population is expressing the same genes and making the same proteins. That means that emergent consciousness is being reflected in everybody's biology. and the flock, the herd, the school, the tribe is evolving together. And that's why a 7-day immersive experience is so profound, because people can literally forget about their life and forget about everything long enough to create a new one.
Create new genes, but also create a new life that is more corresponding to their own truth. And so I guess what you're doing is there are these retreats that are sort of the founding blocks where people can gain habits, can gain insights on how to drive their own change, but also that has impact on society.
If you truly have changed, when you return back into your life, you're going to think, act, and feel differently in the same environment that you left. Yeah. And that's how your life begins to change.
And you start shaping environment.
Exactly. Then the environment, in some mysterious way, begins to reorganize itself to reflect what's going on within you. As within, so without. As above, so below.
What you're saying as well is it's through these elevated emotions, which are about love, about joy, about gratitude, and that is what is getting reflected in the environment.
There's a lot of things that cause that, but I just want to say that it's more than that, because the first couple days of a week-long retreat, it's so important for people to come up against themselves. I mean, 95% of our personality is a set of subconscious programs. Beliefs that we have, perceptions that we have, habits and behaviors that are automatic, and emotions that have been conditioned into our body. And so if that's 95% and we want to create a new life, and our personality creates our personal reality, the first step is coming up against those thoughts that I can't, it's too hard, I'll never change, it's my mother's fault. You know, if you truly want to be happy, you can't complain or blame or make excuses or judge other people. That's going to make you unhappy. And if you've had experiences in your life that have left certain emotions, and those emotions are the emotions that you feel every day, and emotions are a record of the past, you can't create a new future. So the first process is coming up against that 95% that's programmed subconsciously, and become so conscious of your unconscious self that you don't default when you return back into your life.
So it's about unwinding fake beliefs.
Yeah, so that process takes an enormous amount of energy, an enormous amount of awareness. And what we discovered is the only way you become conscious is to catch yourself from going unconscious. And as you keep doing it, you become familiar with those states of mind and body, so conscious that you don't go unconscious. And that's when we begin to objectify our subjective self. I mean, who's doing the observing of those thoughts? That's who we really are. So disentangling from those programs takes a couple days for people, and I want them to sit with themselves long enough that they're not going to get up and check their cell phone or make something to eat or go call somebody or watch TV. That's what people do when they get uncomfortable. I want them to be curious. What's on the other side of that pain? What's on the other side of that emptiness? What's on the other side of that belief? And we discovered that when people go past that point, that's when the brain changes the most, because they're stepping out of the known into the unknown. Now, as they begin to make new choices, they're stepping into that unknown now. Okay, and if they're truly beginning to change, then okay, of course, the next step is what do I want to believe? How will I behave in my life? Who will I become? And that creative process requires feeling elevated emotions, because the majority of emotions that people feel in their waking day are derived from the hormones of stress, and living in stress is living in survival, and that tends to bring out the animal in us. It tends to bring out the fear and the anger and the frustration and the impatience.
Lack of being.
Yeah, that is what creates separation, right? Mm-hmm. So teaching people then to begin to practice feeling love, not just for 2 minutes or a minute, but give them the science behind understanding how to convert out of that fight or flight nervous system into a better nervous system of relaxation, where you can feel love. You can't feel love when you're feeling fear, right? It's hard to do. It's not a time to feel love, right? That's for the survival system. So once a person starts to disentangle from those programs, now let's teach them how to convert and change their emotional state, and let's have them practice it enough times that the heart begins to bloom. And when the heart is awakened, the divine in us is born. The heart is the bridge to the divine, right? And so when a person can feel love or gratitude or appreciation or kindness or care or inspiration or creativity without anyone or anything, they bring it up on their own, that's freedom. That is unconditional love, right? And our data shows that when you do that enough times, you manufacture thousands of different chemicals that actually cause the body to begin to heal and to begin to embrace a greater expression of life. And when we feel that elevated emotion and the heart begins to open, the heart's the creative center, and it's natural for us to begin to dream. So we work on getting people into that state where they can begin to combine a vision of their future, a clear intention, with this kind of elevated emotional state, and that's when they begin to change their biology.
According to you, what should be the root belief that allows this fear system to stay a bit on the side or stay where it should be?
Yeah.
Like when there is a lion coming or an elephant coming, which is not every day.
We need that. Yeah. We've adapted for generations untold. Survival is, I mean, being a human 200 years ago wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, right? So the survival systems have worked for us. The problem is when we live in survival, the very chemicals cause us to heighten our senses, and we become materialists. We narrow our focus on the cause. Over time, we can begin to cause our brain and body to move out of balance just by thought alone. Okay, so most people say, I need a drug, I need a drink, I need a scroll, I need a cigarette, whatever, to make that feeling go away. And what we're saying is no, you can self-regulate, and you can change your emotional state by thought alone. Now, there's such power in that. When people begin to do this, they begin to become more responsible on how they manage their attention and how they manage their energy. And you either live in a state of survival and stress, or you live in a state of creation. And there is a time for survival, and we all have to face off with challenges in our life, and we need to be alert and awake. Yeah. But we can't spend the majority of our day there, right? So then switching over and moving into that state of creation, the fundamental belief that, to answer your question, is that we are creators. And we are creators, but living in survival, you won't believe in that future because you'll believe in your past.
And what is creation but love?
Love is the ingredient. That it is the very energy, it's the very glue that holds everything together. So if you're going to begin to create, you have to fall in love with that future. So much so that the stronger the love you have for that vision, the more you remember it. It's that combination of that thought and the feeling that begins to condition the body emotionally into the future. And the stronger the emotion we have, the more we remember our vision, and we're remembering our future. You do that enough times, there's evidence in the brain and the body to look like the future has already happened. Now think about this. It's important for us to unwind this, because if you feel the love of your future vision before it happens, you will never be looking for it. You only look for it and wonder where it is when you feel separate from it, right? Yeah. So we want people to maintain that modified state in their waking day. Now, if they can, this is where you start to see the feedback in your life and the synchronicities, the opportunities, the serendipities, the coincidences, all of a sudden start coming towards you, and that's when you believe you're the creator of your life, because in some way the divine is sending message to you. Say, Pierre, whatever you're doing, falling in love with that future and staying in that state, you no longer have to go out and rush and force it and try to create it. Somehow they're coming to you, and that is, I think, evidence then that we are the creators. And that's when we say, oh my God, I was just thinking that, or this is a sign. Now when you have the sign, it's an awakening, and you start believing, oh my God, whatever I'm doing is producing this outcome outside of me. And you start doing it more, and your belief then in what's possible, the credence in what you're doing, becomes amplified. And that's when no person, no circumstance, no condition is going to talk you out of that future.
I think it's not only about future, it's also about you gain that belief when you start seeing what there is.
Absolutely.
All the beauty there is, all the infinite abundance there is, right? And so you feel connected and one and whole in a place where you can go give yourself, aka create.
Yes. Well, imagine, I mean, theoretically, We see this so many times. You know, we've seen in real-time brain scans, right? Where we're measuring heart and brain at the same time. We can turn around and look at a person. We can see tears of joy rolling down their face in a meditation. Something is going on inside of them, right? The brain is reflecting a greater level of order, a greater level of wholeness. The different compartments of the brain that were once modulated or compartmentalized, siloed, are now unifying, right? So the brain is functioning in a more holistic state. At the same time, when you feel whole, the heart begins to bloom, right? And now the person is feeling really whole. So whole that it's impossible to want.
That's when you enter in playfulness.
That's when there's a dramatic change in every aspect of your biology, because the body is the unconscious mind. It's so objective. It cannot distinguish between an experience in your life that's creating that emotion of wholeness and the emotion of wholeness that you're creating by thought alone. In other words, the body is actually believing it's living in a loving, nurturing environment. And if the environment signals the gene according to epigenetics, and it does, and that emotional response from the environment is chemical, now you're signaling genes ahead of the environment, and all of a sudden your biology begins to change. Now, how does it change? More growth, brain flourishes, more endogenous chemicals that take away pain, that cause neurons to grow, that suppress cancer, that downregulate viruses from entering the cell. So we have all of these wonderful things that happen when we were able to embrace this elevated state. In fact, some of the research we did on oxytocin, which is the love chemical, you know, some people that we were measuring had 200 times the amount of oxytocin. Now, that's
200?
Yeah, that's not a little love, that's a lot of love. And what that means then is that the person is in such a state that it's impossible to hold a grudge. And that is the moment the past is over. Now, when a person's in that state, forgiveness is no longer a technique. When we overcome the emotion, we're free, right?
There is a saint who was saying, God gave me so much love that I never had to forgive.
Exactly. And there's been great research on oxytocin that shows that just a little elevation in oxytocin, you can't hold a grudge, you trust, right? And so I call that the natural state of being. When we're not living in survival and we're not living in separation, that's who we really are. Now, when you have that elevated state, you can only see reality through the lens of beauty. And I think saints and mystics and poets and holy men and women, the message was all the same. Now, getting there is the challenge.
Isn't it a letting go? In a sense, you just said it, right? And I totally believe that, and we studied a few things about this. This is our natural state. So it's about connecting to what there is, because once you connect to what there is, you see the beauty, you start training your brain to have habit of, you know, I like this color, I like the color of your shirt, and you start training, right? All of a sudden you realize that you did nothing for that. Okay? And it comes to you, right? So you see there's this abundance of love all around you. At that point you're free. At that point you can start being playful, and as I hear you, what you're saying is that our body is made for love, is made to be aligned to abundance, to infinite abundance, to wholeness, to unity, to coherence, which sound concept, that in fact it's not conceptual at all. It's about daily practice.
Yes.
But now, if you know that these are practices, right, what is the most pleasurable? Practicing fear, practicing hate, practicing all this type of painful emotions, or practicing gratitude, practicing receiving, practicing seeing beauty, practicing playfulness, practicing creativity.
From a theoretical and intellectual, philosophical point of view, that's absolutely the truth. I think the challenge really is that the hormones of stress and the emotions that are associated with all of those different
highly
chemicals,
addictive.
they're so addictive. And so the 5% of the conscious mind may say, I want to change, but we've been programmed subconsciously. No different than the alcoholic who says, I know this is really bad for me, but I'm going to quit. And then an hour later, they have a drink, right? And with every emotion, there's always for a person a reason why they feel that way. Some event from the past. They'll say, I am this way because of this experience that happened 2 years ago or 5 days ago or 10 years ago or whatever. And so what they're really saying is, I had an event in my life that changed me and I haven't been able to change since. Now, that story that people tell about their past only reaffirms the circuits in their brain, firing and wiring the same memories, and sending the same emotional chemicals to their body, and they're conditioning their body and mind into the past. Now it's subconscious. The body's believing it's living in the same past experience 24 hours a day. Now, and it's my mother's fault, or it's my father's fault, or it's my ex-husband's fault, or whatever that is, right? It's the government's fault, or whoever. There's always a reason for that, right? So there has to be a reconceptualization that takes place for the individual, because if you say to that person, those emotions are addictive, and feeling those emotions aren't loving to you, and those emotions on the long term will downregulate genes and create disease, the stronger the emotion you feel, the more you'll pay attention to the person you think is causing it, and you're giving your power away to that person, you got to stop. Now, all of a sudden, the person goes, you're right, that no one is worth my life. No one is worth me being sick. And this is how people heal. They say,
enough.
I'm done. I am done. And they make a decision with such firm intention that the choice that they're making has an energy that causes their body to respond to their mind.
How to get to that decision?
Well, that's my message. Why wait? Why wait? So what we discovered is, if you give people enough knowledge and information, and now they understand what they're supposed to do, and now I understand why I'm supposed to do it, right? The how gets easier. So they're going to say, if I feel love, I'm going to signal new genes. If I learn how to do this, I could feel something differently. It's going to make me happy. No person, no circumstance, no condition in my life is going to take love from me ever again. Now, again, the application of that, just like practicing, I don't know, you ski. We talked about snowboarding when we first met.
I like to practice 4 to 6 times a week.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I know you do. But if you learn how to snowboard, there's a learning curve, right? Yeah. You're going to sit a little bit on your butt.
Of course, that's what I believe.
Yeah. So if you're going to really practice feeling love, you're going to catch yourself feeling another emotion when you're practicing. Now, most people go, I'm not good at this. I'm a failure. I'll do it tomorrow. It's too hard. But if you work in a community where there's 2,100 or 2,200 people and everybody's doing it, now you start practicing. And there's an energy that takes place. Now, that's the beauty behind community. People change people. So if you're practicing it enough times and nothing happens the first 2 days, keep practicing. And we know now the techniques, and we understand how to work with the body to begin to change that. Now, when the person starts feeling love, and they're truly in that state, their past no longer exists to them. Their past only exists when they feel that emotion. Just one taste of that, just one little taste of that, and the person makes the choice. And now the practice is no longer, oh, I have to. The practice is, I want to. Like, I want to feel this way.
They integrate it in their identity, in their perceived identity. Yeah.
And they make it a lifestyle. They make it a priority. Like, if I feel this way, my life is going to change. If I feel this way, my life is going to stay the same. Let's see. We had a man on the stage that had stage 4 cancer, pancreatic cancer, very, very terminal. Yeah. And he was like, they're telling me I'm going to die. I have 3 months to live. Okay, this camp is death. And he started looking into our work, and he's like, this camp is healing. And he never meditated in his life, and he just kind of figured it out. And in a very short amount of time, he's cancer-free. Like, that's what happens when we change. Everything changes. Yeah,
it's about certainty. It's proven that at these phases of cancer, the best remedy is placebo. Right? And that's one of your books, right? You Are the Placebo. And it's about changing belief in such a radical manner that your certainty outpasses everything.
Yeah, and that's what knowledge does. That's why we never do any inner work or any type of meditation without fundamental teaching for everybody to be able to understand it and think about it and share with the person next to them so they can build a model of understanding. The reminding of what they're learning. You know, mind is the brain in action, reproducing the same level of mind, firing and wiring those circuits. Nothing is left to conjecture. If nothing is left to superstition, if nothing is left to dogma, and they understand exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it, the how gets easier. And the most amazing part about this is the prefrontal cortex and the brain switches on. That's the boss. And it wants an outcome, and that's called intention.
Dogma in the sense of being imposed from the outside, right? Because what in fact you're providing is nowadays certainty, which is science.
Yes.
And with this science, people get the certainty to make the first step.
Believe, behave, become. Yeah. And that's what our latest scientific studies actually show that. It shows that people can change in 7 days.
7 days. Yeah.
7 days, yeah. So when we show our data to reputable scientists.
Talk about your 2 latest articles that went out recently that are mind-blowing.
I have been on so many Zoom calls with scientists that are very interested in our data, and from reputable universities all around the United States. And when they see these changes in 7 days, even NASA, they couldn't believe. They thought it was a year-long study, right? And so we did one of our latest papers was called the Emergent study. We took 20 individuals. We randomly selected them out of the community. 10 advanced meditators. These are people that have been in my work, that do meditation just about on a regular basis every day. And then 10 novice meditators who came to the event, knew nothing about my work. Some of them may have meditated a little bit, but it wasn't a practice for most of them. And we put them in an fMRI machine, and that's just an advanced way to see a motion picture of the brain. Instead of a snapshot, a motion picture. And you can see what areas are absorbing in energy and are active. And so they went through a 7-day event, fully engaged in the process. And at the end of 7 days, we just could not believe what we saw. And it was just spectacular. The first thing that we saw is there's a big cluster of neurons in the brain, a network called the default mode network. Yeah. And that's the brain's predictor. And it's how we kind of navigate in life. The brain is an anticipation machine. And it's always trying to predict the future based on what it knows and experiences the past, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but many people who are living in stress and living in survival, that part of the brain, those networks begin to go very active, and we start to overfocus, and we start to overthink, and we start to overpredict, right? And so that part of the brain consumes an enormous amount of energy. It consumes most of the brain's energy because we're always anticipating, right? So nothing wrong with this, but when we're out of balance, it overpredicts, and then when it gets to the reality, it corrects the prediction. And sometimes it's way off, and that's when we have stress and we react, and sometimes it's just a small correction in the prediction. Well, at the end of 7 days, the default mode network and another network called the salient network completely shut off. Completely shut off. So now what does that mean just from a theoretical standpoint? If the default mode is shut off, the brain's no longer predicting the future based on the past, and there's only one place it's existing, and that's the present moment. Yeah. And so now, if you look at studies of people who take psilocybin as an example, without taking any exogenous substance, the person's brain looks like they're taking psilocybin. They're in a completely different state. Now, if you look at an area of the brain that controls the body's orientation in space, the fMRIs show that with the advanced meditators, they actually grew new real estate, new neurons in their brain in 7 days, right? So what wasn't there before the event started, at the end of 7 days, new neurons and new connections form in the part of the brain where the person is working the muscle in their brain to orient their body into the present moment so that they can be more present. At the end of those 7 days, when the person opens their eyes, Their brain is still showing that they're in the present moment. In other words, almost the same state that they were in with their eyes closed in the present moment is now with their eyes open, they're in the present moment, and they're no longer trying to predict the future. And the critic, the voice that's always talking to you in your head is gone. The critic is gone. The analytical mind is gone. Now, when we live in stress and we live in survival, the brain compartmentalizes, as we talked about. We shift our attention from one person, to another meeting, to another place, to another thing, to another time, and the brain starts to compartmentalize. In fact, as we age, those silos work independently and never communicate with each other, and we get very neuro-rigid in a way. So at the end of 7 days, you see this suppression of those compartments, and this more unity that's taking place in the brain. The brain is more coherent, and if there's less modulation, less compartmentalization, the brain is reflecting a greater level of order, and the brain is processing a more unified, more holistic level of consciousness. That brain state is the proclivity. It is the exact proclivity that takes place for a person to have a mystical experience. The more order there is in the brain, the more the brain is going to process new information.
And what's the consequence of that on daily life of people in terms of health, in terms of balance, in terms of relationship with others?
Well, we can only talk around that because you have to experience. It's like trying to explain what a mango tastes like, right? Yeah. But what the person is they're more patient, they're more present, they're more kind, they're more loving, they're more creative, they're more considerate, they're in less lack. They can self-correct their emotional state in a shorter amount of time. In other words, I'd rather feel this way than that way, right? Yeah. So I make that choice. So the next thing we noticed is that if the brain's default mode network is shut off, there's a lot of energy now that the brain has. Yeah. And what occurs is that the cells in the body start functioning in a way more efficient level. It's like difference between burning a log in a fireplace and jet fuel. I mean, this is the difference, right? So, and then we started thinking, okay, well, if there are little areas in the brain that have grown, like, because, everybody says you can't grow new neurons, and we're seeing that in 7 days people did, like flourishing. Are there factors in the blood that could actually be responsible for this nerve cell growth? And we found these very chemicals that are brain-derived neurotropic factors that are like fertilizer to the brain. In every single individual that we measured, there were factors that were actually responsible for, we put neurons in a dish, and we use this adaptive transfer where we put the plasma of the advanced meditators, and all of a sudden you see the connections of the neurons just dramatically begin to expand. In other words, there's factors in the plasma that weren't there before that are causing the brain to grow. Now, what does that mean? I mean, those factors, once we isolate them, could be used for potentially treating people with neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Okay, so now, what else? We discovered in the plasma of these people, 100% of the people that we measured were making their own endogenous opiates. Now, opioids and opiates are morphine-like chemicals. They're not ingesting any Valium or morphine, but at the end of 7 days, there's enough evidence in their blood to show that they're going to have less pain, and they're going to have a sense of euphoria, like a relaxed and awake state. And so we started uncovering all of these wonderful things that happen in a very short amount of time.
So the body reflects basically this access to present moment.
Yeah, so the body, instead of being in a state of catabolism or tissue breakdown that's usually degenerative, that relates to being out of homeostasis and balance, there's such balance and order that's taking place in the body that there's pro-life and pro-growth in just about every system that we've discovered. That paper in the Nature journal, the Communications Biology, most scientific articles, when you publish an article, it gets probably around 600 to 900 accesses or downloads. Yeah. We had 125,000 downloads on that article. And there's a thing called an almetric. And an almetric is kind of like how many times it's referenced or how many times, it's talked about on the news or in podcasts or in magazines and newspapers, a good metric is 20. The last time we looked, it was at 167. Now, what's the significance of that? The importance of that is that people really want to learn this stuff, that the power is within them. And the final thing we discovered was that while this whole thing is taking place, there are pro-inflammatory factors and anti-inflammatory factors being secreted in the nervous system at the same time. What does that mean? That means that there's massive deconstruction going on in the moment on a cellular level. At the same time, there's massive reconstruction going on in the cell at the same time. And so when you put this all together and you're seeing that this is happening, number one, in 7 days, and it's not happening in a small percentage of people, it's happening in a large percentage of people, and it's evidence that you can change, that should empower the person to start believing in themselves and believing in possibility.
And as well, one of the challenges when you want to change, I'm talking about inside change, right?
Exactly.
Which is the most important.
That's the only way you can change.
Yeah, and is the habit.
Yeah.
Right. People may be tempted to be discouraged because, okay, I'm going to try 3 weeks, and then maybe, having a disempowered belief that maybe it's going to go down. But when you see that changing the way you see things, changing the way you apprehend reality has impact on the brain, means you're also backed up by your body, right?
My goal is to have enough evidence that it becomes a new belief for people. I mean, the last 2 years, Pierre, has been such an awakening for me because we've had so many people stand on the stage in front of an audience that never came to a week-long event. They taught themselves how to heal with very serious health conditions, and some were doctors, veterinary doctors, physicians, engineers, PhDs, intelligent people, educated people that have healed themselves without coming to an event. They taught themselves, they studied, they read, it made sense to them, they practiced, they kept practicing, but they were not doing their meditations to heal. They were doing their meditations to change. And then when I change, I heal, right? And that is a big takeaway. And some people that had serious health conditions, and the chemo and the surgery and the radiation and the diets didn't change their health, and they realized nothing changes until I change. Some of them were doing their meditations 2 or 3 times a day, and I asked them, why? Why are you doing them? Why did you do them so many times? And they said, I started to disbelieve. I started to doubt because I became afraid, or I started feeling sick, or my body was reacting. And instead of giving up on myself,
Did it more.
I did it more, and I changed the belief. Yeah. And that is exactly
when they reach a breakthrough,
because they would not get up from their meditation until they believed in that future again. And the only way they could do that is change their emotional state. And that was their work. It was the overcoming.
When you say believing in the future, I know it's a way you talk, right? Isn't it more at the end what you mean is believing in the being? In a sense, I have still so much to give, right? And when you go from a change inside that then has impact on the body, if I hear you correctly, that's what you're saying. It's more about whom am I going to give, who am I going to be, and how do I reflect love? How do I reflect the infinite number of options? Some people say future is an illusion, right? And from a quantum physics perspective. And so isn't it more about using time to be more? And then it has impact on the body, it has impact on the external conditions.
I don't want to get into too many semantics. I define being, or a state of being, as thought and feeling. Yeah. And when we change our state of being, the brain is the seat of our conscious awareness, and the heart is the seat of our emotions, our energy. So if we're going to change our state of being, I'm not talking about a future that's way out there. I'm talking about a dream of who you want to become now. No. Yeah. And the brain is the architect. It is the designer, and it could only dream based on what it has stored in there, based on knowledge and experience. So if a person wants to become abundant, they better study people that are abundant. And they got to decide what they have to become, right? So the brain has to have a coordinate. It has to have an intention. And the intention to be healed, or the intention to be abundant, or the intention to be in a great relationship, or the intention to have a transcendental experience is a coordinate. And the brain likes...
It's a coordinate of the manifestation.
Right. Yeah. So think of the heart and the emotion as the energy that you're using, but the intention is the direction. So you're directing your attention towards there, and the energy is taking you there. And when you combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, now you're changing your state of being. Keep doing that, the brain's going to change neurologically, and the body's going to change chemically. And so then you move into a new state of being, because it's not about your wealth, it's not about your health, it's not about your relationship, it's not about the transcendental or mystical experience, it's about who you become.
And probably it's about also whom you are already, you know. I've got this theory that we are the qualities we put habitually in place, plus all the other ones we dream to live, right?
Remove the emotions and the veils and the conditioning and the hypnosis. You start taking away those beliefs, the divine in every human being naturally comes through. And that's the pleasure of my work. The greatest gift that I have as a human being is watching those people on the stage tell their story and looking out at an audience of 2,000 people and seeing the divine in every human. They are awakened. There is a life behind their eyes, and they're not the same person, right? Yeah. They're a different person. They're in a different state of being. And they did that without anyone or anything. They did it by removing those veils and those masks and those layers to allow that divine intelligence to kind of find a crack and move through them. And I believe our purpose in life is not to be good or to please God or do the right thing or anything. I think our purpose in life is to remove those veils, to allow the divine to flow right through every human being. And what is that? We become it, and it becomes us. We become more loving. It is a loving intelligence. We become more giving. It's a giver of life. We become more conscious. It's a consciousness. We become more mindful. It has an amazing mind. We become more willful. It has an amazing will. Its nature becomes our nature, and its mind becomes our mind. And again, you could only talk around that, because you got to light a match in a dark place, and you got to be willing to look at that part of you that you never look at because you want to be distracted by everyone and everything out there. But sooner or later, in the light of all eternity, you're going to have to look at that part of yourself.
And then growth, in that sense, when you have to look at that part of yourself, is growth, in a sense, is becoming more united to this divine flow that you're talking about, right?
And we are connected. Yeah. Our other study that we did in Explore magazine was really about studying these random event generators. We have sophisticated technological coin tosses. Yeah. And we use quantum tunneling to be able to discern when there's nobody in the room and there's no energy in the room, this machine throws ones and zeros randomly, but the longer it does it, it's 50-50, right? Okay. 50% zeros, one. Nobody's there. When it's time to heal another person, it's no longer about you, it's about you giving love to another person. We see the greatest biological changes take place in the healers and the healees. Their heart coherence, the amount of energy in their heart, after the week-long event, 2 weeks later, continues to improve. The act of giving in some way life to another person's life. The healers continue to feel more love weeks after the event. The random event generators, when we are in that act, go from 01011110011000011 like that, goes all of a sudden 11111111, and it just goes right outside of normal. So random events become less random and more orderly. Okay, that's a stretch for some people, but let's stretch you a little further. Imagine that there's this invisible field called the electron field, theoretical physics, that permeates the entire universe. You can't see it, but it's like a liquid where waves, just like waves on the ocean, move about. Theoretical physics says my electrons and your electrons are the same electrons, and we're just, we have this illusion of separation, but we're all connected. Yeah. Okay. If that's the case, when we see these signatures take place in the room, there's sensors all over the planet. Same mechanism. The signatures on the other side of the globe, it's the exact same signature as the signature in the room. Now here's our question. If the possibility of that happen is, from a statistical standpoint, is zero, and yet we're seeing the same signatures. The exciting part about that tells us then, in some way, the coherence of that small group of people was influencing this field non-locally. And the question is, what is the number that we could get where we have so much coherence that it changes human behavior?
Yeah.
That's what we're after. Yeah. It's not the number of people, we know that for sure. It's not the amount of energy, because you have a stadium full of people in a soccer game. It's the most coherent signal, right? So 2,000 people coming together and producing the same effect. We're creating a vibration here, we're creating a field effect here, and the same vibration is happening somewhere else. It's unbelievable. So we are all connected. So then it's not about just focusing on peace, because there's been enough peace-gathering studies, peer-reviewed studies that says that crime rates go down, and car accidents go down, and violence goes down, and there's economic growth when meditators are focusing on peace. It's about demonstrating peace. You now get out in your life and show people what peace looks like. Show them what love looks like. That's the demonstration. This is the plane of demonstration. Demonstrate peace, and more people will do the same.
Yeah, that's one thing. Another thing as well is instead of focusing only on peace, you can go at the root cause of war, right? And lack of coherence, lack of unity, fear, and then start meditating on that. At the foundation, we also have to exactly that.
You're doing great work there.
It's hard to crack this culture of fear, to put a culture of abundance, but not only material abundance. So I would call that prosperity, right? But this abundance of love, there is enough for everybody, more than enough for everybody, right? And it's how you go give yourself. As you just said now, when people go give themselves, go healing, they are growing, right? We are this strange being. When we give ourselves, we grow.
We call that in this work the abundance of life, right? Because you could have an abundance of wealth and finances. You can have an abundance of love in relationships. You can have an abundance of vitality and energy. You could have an abundance of freedom, an abundance of time, an abundance of synchronicities, abundance of mystical experiences, abundance of opportunities, an abundance of virtues, an abundance of material things. And people are programmed into believing that abundance has to do with money. It doesn't. We teach them abundance of opportunities. You don't need money, you need opportunities. So if you're creating opportunities in your life, it changes the game around money. Money is the side effect.
It's resource, it's like electricity, right?
It's the consequence of opportunity, right?
I want to switch to something else. It's something I already told you once. It's impressive how your work reflects big parts of Christian civilization, which has impacted the world for the last 2,000 years. It's impressive. You hear things when Jesus Christ said, when you ask something to God your Father, do it just thanking for having already received it. It's exactly what you're saying, right? It's with gratitude for what you dream, right? He tells them, go 2 by 2, yeah? Go heal people. And it said they were healing people. St. Peter, who created the Christian church, was said he had so much clarity, intensity, and love that he would heal with his shadow. And it's impressive to see everything that has formed, or at least the Christian civilization, you come with science confirming it. And I think it's the first time. Right? And it's impressive that it comes in a moment where our culture has been a bit, led down to fear, led down to angers, led down to lack, as you were saying now, that you're coming with this very strong message. Look, that's how we are. Right? You come with the language of a society, which is science, saying another certainty. We are made for love. We are made to enjoy love. And it's really impressive.
I think our senses fool us into the illusion of lack, right, and separation. And so I think over time we develop certain rules in three-dimensional reality, and many times people are waiting for their healing to feel gratitude and wholeness. They're waiting for their wealth to feel abundance. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their success to feel empowered, or the mystical experience to feel awe. In other words, they're waiting for something in their life out there to change, to take away that lack or separation of not having what they want. And they spend their whole life in lack and separation. And the message is, if you're truly going to create something new, you have to feel the emotion. The moment you start feeling gratitude and wholeness, your healing begins. The moment you're empowered, you're stepping towards your success. The moment you're generating abundance, right? You're gonna create wealth. The moment you're in love with yourself and you're in love with life, you create an equal. The moment you're in awe of the moment, you'll have a mystical experience. That's causing an effect, right? So the emotional signature of gratitude is such an interesting thing, because when we receive something favorable, or something wonderful is happening to us in the moment, or just happened to us, the consequence, the outcome of that experience produces the feeling of gratitude. So gratitude's signature is receiving, right? You are in a state of receivership. So if you're truly praying for something, and you're praying in lack and separation, you don't have the energy, you have the intention without the energy that's going to create the experience. The moment you feel grateful in asking for it in a state of gratitude, your body is in the perfect state from a quantum perspective to receive whatever you have your attention on. Now, we don't pray in our work to have our prayers answered. We get up as if they're already answered. And getting to that state, we have to lay down our materialistic mind, because the materialist is waiting for the experience to feel the emotion. The quantum mind is saying, I'm going to feel the emotion before the experience, and that's what creates the experience. And so we discovered that it's not enough to just have intention, because without the emotion, there's no energy. It's not enough to have love without intention, because there's no direction, right? And so you combine those two things, and there's been studies, where people, expert healers and people who practice praying, they were given assignment to unwind or wind the DNA, and they practiced with intention, did nothing. Mm-hmm. Then they practiced generating love and gratitude and sent the signal out, and nothing. But when they felt the emotion of what it would feel like, that the DNA would unwind, and then they directed their attention to it, more than 20% of the DNA unwound. Thought, the electrical charge, the feeling, the magnetic charge, right? And that electromagnetic field begins to produce waves right in that invisible field that begins to affect matter. Now, people say, well, that only works for the very tiny. It doesn't work for the very large. Well,
20%?
If you keep practicing, you'll get really good at producing bigger effects in your life. And so I don't look for principles in the Bible or in sacred texts to kind of align with them. We just basically look at data. We look at the data, and truth is truth, right? And so I've sat next to Christians, Catholics, Baptists, Muslims, Kabbalistic practitioners. I've sat next to Zen Buddhists on planes, and people say to me, what do you do? Right? And I'm just like, oh God. I'm going to answer this question. I'm an author. Okay, what do you write about? Oh no, you don't want to ask me that. And they're like, that's exactly what my faith says. My faith says, well, truth is truth. But if you're talking in a language that's 2,000 years old or 5,000 years old, people are going to shut off. I've been to the Parliament of the World Religions, and I've sat with really great religious leaders, and I've watched scholars argue over the meaning of one word, and it was so ridiculous. That's the language of the time. Let's create a new language. Let's create a new language that's inclusive, that includes everybody. And story, allegory, is a great way for people to relate. So there's great stories in the Bible that are really saying, like, my God, this makes sense to me, right? I personally don't believe when Jesus said, the Father within me, he meant the Father. I think he meant the mother-father. I think it's the mother-father principle, not the father principle. I think somehow that got changed at some point, but I think it is a mother-father principle. It is both nurturing and love, and it's both providership and intention. It's the combination of the two.
As far as I understand, in Christian religion, indeed, it's all what you say, right? It's providing, governing, the source of everything, the actual cause, uncause of everything, and the principle of infinite love. And whatever good, it's sustaining the being by
awakening the Christ within every human being. Yeah. Within the Christ consciousness in every human being, because we have witnessed so many people heal when other people have a coherent brain and a coherent heart, and they're giving life to another person's life. I've seen people heal right before my eyes. Some of them I hesitate to say because most people won't believe, but of biblical proportions. I'm pretty sure that Jesus said, all these things that I do, you could do and greater. Okay, I heard that when I went to church, and that stuck with me. Like, okay, that's the message. Okay, so you can't do it when you're in fear. That's the Son of Man. Yep. You got to do it in a state of love. That is the Son of God when you do that, or the daughter of God when we do that, right? And so you got to get into that state. That is why it's so difficult for people to really begin to heal people that they love, because they're so emotionally attached, right? And you got to get beyond that, right? And so I think there's a lot of intersections of truth when it's, when you see the evidence that's taking place right now. There's a revival.
Exactly.
A revival of that I think that transcends religion, right? Because it's so inclusive. I've seen every race, every culture, every country, every sexual preference, every diet, whatever it is that divides people. I've seen them
rising up,
transcend and reach that point where they have connected to something greater. And the language of transformation, we have scientists, really smart people that study the language of transformation. They come and study the language of people in this work. A large majority of them start out curious. And then that curiosity, after the event starts, there is a challenge. And nobody changes unless they're challenged. So I have to challenge the audience. The people who see that challenge as a challenge will reach the next stage called connection faster than the person who sees it as a struggle. The person who sees it as a struggle has got to work a little harder, right? The person who sees it as a challenge and they keep going, they'll reach that point of connection. And once they reach connection, now that could be connection to their heart, connection to the divine, connection to the understanding of the work. Experience is the great professor. All of a sudden they go, I get it. Yeah. I get all this craziness. I was about ready to quit. It was too hard. Oh my God, I got it. There's an alignment both within them and all around them. They connect to something. And then that connection leads to transformation, right? It's so important to study that, because once a person has that transcendental connection, the language says the number one thing the person says is, I felt it. Now, if you feel something with your eyes closed, you're having an inward experience. You're having an inward experience with God, the divine, whatever you want to call that. And it's ineffable. There's no language to describe what that feels like, because all of your memories and all your feelings are coming from three-dimensional reality, through your senses. This is coming from somewhere else. And it's divided into two categories. The feeling from whatever that inward experience is very somatic. In other words, I felt every single cell of my body vibrating with love, or vibrating with energy. The top of my head blew off. My heart opened up or exploded. It turned on like an engine. Lightning was shooting out of my fingers. There's something very somatic where they're touching something. They're touching source. They're touching the divine. Yeah. And then the other side, that's very emotional. Like, I have never, ever in my life felt love like this. And this is a key moment, Pierre, because this is where the truth comes out, because the person goes, oh my God, the love that I've been looking for in my search of living in such emptiness and lack was never outside of me. It's been within me the whole time. That now the kingdom of heaven is within me, and now they're no longer looking out there. They don't need anybody to feel love. I mean, they're sovereign beings, right? We've been lucky enough to capture that brain state in real time, and the person is in a state of such high consciousness. They're in such an elevated state of what's called gamma brainwaves. Yeah. They're in super consciousness. There's an arousal that's taking place with the divine, but the arousal is not fear. The arousal is not pain. The arousal is not anger or aggression. That's all survival. Yes. The arousal is ecstasy. The arousal is bliss, and it's coming from within them. The side effect of that, of their interaction with this invisible energy, causes a biological upgrade in their body. There's the Parkinson's, now it's gone. There's the cancer, now it's gone. There's the blindness, now it's gone. There's the deafness, now it's gone. There's the stage 4 cancer, now it's gone. There's the myasthenia gravis, now it's gone. There's an upgrade. The person just took a bite of wholeness. They move closer to God, they move closer to source, they move closer to wholeness, and it's reflected in their biology. And then, when they come out of that experience, the language is, I'm no longer that person. They'll say, I am somebody else. The disease existed in that person. That personality, no, I'm somebody else. That was who I was. Like, there's a sense of temporality. And the only way they can describe the ineffable that transcends language is metaphor. They have to use, like, oh my God, it was like the greatest feeling of love I ever had. I mean, it was like
And what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's
because you're saying they're using.
I think it's the divine within us that awakens, and it is the unknown, right? I mean, I was laughing about this the other day. I was just taking a walk on the beach, and I was like, okay, Joe Dispenza, you believe you're eternal, okay? Most religions say you are, right?
Yeah.
Right? There's only a few that I've seen that don't. That means you're going to be around for a long time. You're going to be stuck with you for a long time. Okay, so you get to heaven. Well, then what? You're going to just hang out and listen to harps? You're going to get bored, right? There's got to be the quest for a greater understanding, right?
It's seeing God face to face.
The probability that we're perceiving the truth of reality is 0. That's the mathematics. And there's more information in the unseen than there ever be in the seen. So the person who's interacting with that energy is informing matter. And they have a very transcendental inward experience that's very visual. And there's chemistry in their brain that changes, that they're experiencing something that's outside anything that they've ever known, right? And when they come back to Pierre or to Joe Dispenza or to whoever,
there are more of this energy.
Their spectrum of reality is broadened because they could never get the upgrade from inside three-dimensional reality. It's everything's sensory and known. They're getting the upgrade from outside three-dimensional reality, and its experience changes circuitry in their brain, and now they begin to perceive that other 99% of reality that the brain wasn't wired to perceive. And so, and the emotion that they feel from the connection with Source humbles them to be more kind, like to be more caring. The divine becomes them, and they become the divine.
I think humility is truth, right? And accessing to this point that you're saying allows them to see beauty better. And so you start enjoying it more. You don't have this delirium of protagonism anymore, right? You don't have to protect yourself. You protect it. You're loved, and that's healing, right?
And I think the whole purpose of this is to be able to demonstrate the divine in our life. I mean, the whole purpose of this is to experience it. And I want to get really good at doing it with my eyes open. I don't want to just have the mystical moment during a meditation. I want to see the divine in everything. And if you keep interacting with it enough times, you will begin to see the divine in every human being and everything, because now your brain is wired.
Your brain is wired. And that's what is great about what we're doing, is you see the wiring of this. Right? Because as you say, many religions, many philosophies have talked about that, have sort of hinted it, have sort of approached it. what I find fantastic is that you do two things. Is one, you show the science around it, and second, you explain people how to live it. And in a way that is really wired in our body, which is the instrument we use in this universe, right? and that's a fantastic work you're doing.
I was at the University of California, San Diego, and we were meeting with the science teams and all the young grad students and the postdocs. And we all walked over to the neuroscience lab, and they have all of our neuroscience, all our scans and everything. The neuroscientist, she was very skeptical, very skeptical. She was like
strange.
Oh, she was. Listen, all of our scientists have changed so much. They were started out as skeptics, and now they're like, this is medicine. And I was sitting with our lead scientist with her, and the students were at this long table, and she said, I don't believe that in these gamma states. I've looked at it. I just don't think it's possible. And we were like, well,
you just colored it.
We said, well, we see it quite a bit. She said, oh, they're probably moving. I said, well, I have cameras on them. You know, we have cameras on them. They're not moving. She said, oh, they're probably moving. Long story short, she said, I'm going to come with 128 lead caps, and we're going to sit them down, and we're going to hook them up with their hearts, and we're going to do all this stuff. And I said, fine, go for it. They picked 6 people.
Yeah.
5 out of those 6 people, the 6th one also, but 5 out of those 6 people hit this unbelievable state of gamma. 5 out of 6 people. She said, I couldn't have picked 6 greater subjects. And she said, no, we have to measure all the time. We have to measure all the time. And I said, listen, there's 2,000 people in the audience. If you randomly picked those 6 people, and 5 out of those 6 people are in elegant brain states, look out amongst you, extrapolate. That means a lot of people are having a connection with this divine intelligence. And it doesn't always have to be where they hit this gamma state. Just the some people don't even know they were in gamma. Or we ask them, but their interaction, paying more attention to it and less attention to them, feeling more of it and less of them. Yeah. Falling in love with it more than them. Somehow, the brain acts like a transducer, like a radio receiver, and the information remember, frequency carries information.
That was my next question. Yeah.
Coherent brain, you can read information. Incoherent brain, you're disconnected. Get your brain coherent, that's what our fMRI studies show. You're going to have a mystical experience. The interaction with that invisible field of energy at the end of 7 days, by you just paying attention to it, produces antiviral chemicals, anti-cancer chemicals, anti-pain chemicals, chemicals for neurogenesis, changes every aspect of who we are. There's information
that is coming from there.
That was not there before the 7-day event. And I say to the scientists over and over again.
So it's about receptiveness to what
there is that information coming from? Where is it coming from? Because they're not taking any pill to create that in their bloodstream. It's coming from their interaction with this invisible field of energy. And at the end of 7 days, their gene expression looks like they're living in a whole new environment and they're in a ballroom. And I've been to a lot of ballrooms, and there's nothing very exciting about a ballroom. It's really boring. And yet their bodies look like they're in a whole new life. And the changes are happening within. So then, is the experiment the truth? If I change my inner state, as within, so without. If I change my inner state and I keep practicing it, then my view, my perception, my experience of reality should change, yes?
You make me think to Michelangelo, in a sense that he was saying, I'm not sculpting. I'm taking away what there is too much. And at some point appears the statue, right? So he's looking for the truth of the beauty that is inside. It seems the work you're doing. I have a science fiction question.
Science fiction?
Yeah, science fiction.
Okay, let me stretch here.
So,
science fiction, okay.
Don't worry, we're going to remain in no space. It's all about frequencies. Okay? And we know that the brain mimics the frequencies that are around, right? can we imagine at some point that we could produce things that would emit frequencies in such a way that brains would reflect it and be in a higher state thanks to these frequencies that would be broadcasted?
You mean exogenous frequencies that are mechanically created?
Yeah.
I'll just keep it simple.
The reason for which I ask this question is are there ways to help people more?
There's techniques like transcranial magnetic resonance, right?
Yeah.
That's an external frequency that sometimes allows different dormant areas of the brain to become activated. I have a colleague from Stanford University who works with radio frequencies for Parkinson's diseases. And he can, well, you met him. Down to the voxel. Now, a voxel is the smallest unit you could measure in the brain that they could go in with a radio frequency and switch a nucleus in terms of its function and switch enough of them and you see dramatic changes.
But that's for healing the body, right? Here I'm more talking about healing the soul.
Well, transcranial magnetic resonance can create different brain states that could ultimately produce different frequencies. Yes, I think it's possible. I think there's probably technology in military, in defense systems where you could probably influence human behavior in certain ways. But I think that when you come to these super, super high states, I think it's really important to learn how to do that.
And how to stay in the state.
And do it on your own, right? Without relying on anything outside of you. The good news is, very good news is you can get really good at that. And there are people at this event that are part of the staff that I could bring them in. Hook them up to a brain scan, and I can say to them, go into gamma. And they'll go right into gamma. And the scientists say, how do you do that? And you know what their answer is? It's really hard not to
do it.
Yeah, it's really hard not to do it because if it's there, I'm going to connect, right? So, and why is that important? Because it takes the obligation out of having to pray, having to connect with God as something like, oh, God,
you are connected.
If you've tasted it, and then you would know where to meet it, and where you meet the divine is in love, and that is the work, right? That is the work, and every great saint, charismatic leader, Christ, all said the same thing, right? You have to get into that state. Love is what connects us, right? And so I think you can get really good at doing it on your own.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Pierre. It's always great to spend time with you.
I wish you a fantastic time here. Thank you for all what you do for so many people. I hope to see you next time in Rome.
Yes, next time. I think it's my turn to go there, yeah. You know, when I was there the last time, what I enjoyed the most was just talking to great minds. There are a lot of people there at the Academy that I loved speaking with and exchanging ideas with, and just kind of, opening up to information. And if I can contribute in some way.
Contributed a lot, and explaining these things is so important because it's about whom we are as human beings, right? It's about rising up.
It's not only about rising up, it's also about, it's no longer a story from 2,000 years ago. The story's happening now.
No. Yeah,
and the coming of a Christ consciousness, everybody's included. It's everybody.
What's very interesting as well, and it resonates very much to what you're saying, he was always saying, the kingdom of God is very near. People have interpreted it as, okay, in 2 months, in 3 years, in a time manner, right? Whereas in fact it's in a state manner. And he says you can access the kingdom of God this way, this way, this way, and it's exactly what you're explaining.
Yeah, and think of John the Baptist. Look at me now. What did he say? Repent, repent, the kingdom of heaven is all around you. Repent, change your mind.
Change your mind.
Change your mind, it's all around you. Change your mind, change your life. Try it out. Try it out for yourself. If it's the truth, get into the experiment. Try it out. If I change my resentment, my judgment, my frustration, my impatience to love, kindness, caring, gratitude, will my life change? Try it out as an experiment. It seems like it does. Nobody is so special to be excluded, right? We're all included. And so take it out of the theoretical realm. It's happening right now. try it out to see if it's the truth. That's the exciting part about it.
Exact thing is about truth. And also I wanted to thank you, because your principles, what you identify, can be applied to large problems in society as well. When people start seeing large problems in society through the lens of the being you're talking about, right? And through the way things can be solved, it has impact. You participated to meetings for peace with us in the Vatican, and things you said synced through, right? And it helps then a lot of people to see things differently, see the beauty there is, as well in the other.
Sometimes it's good to hear it from somebody else, right? It works around the board. I mean, that's why I love the scientists at times to get up and present to the community, because now I'm not saying it, they're saying it, but they're not even saying it, the data's saying it, right? The data's saying that that it is the truth.
And it has impact.
That's the purpose of all of this.
Because it could be a very nice scientific research, okay, beautiful, but when on top of that, it has this impact, that is literally saving lives when applying certain things that you say, right? That is reducing the intensity of certain wars, right? To hopefully go to peace, and which is a natural state of human being, right?
There has to be an emergent consciousness that you and I and everybody have to demonstrate for the world to change. And I think the best way we do that is when we change ourselves. If everybody's changing themselves, right, and they're the example, you can change the world in that way. And what is the number? What is that magic number where there's enough people that are working to change themselves, to understand that when I change, the world changes? I think that's a good place to start.
2%, and then it goes to 12, and then
we're on our way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much.